The thing that I really enjoy about payments is I genuinely feel like it's a product and industry that can be a technology business. Ultimately, a bank is going to be a bank. With payments, sending money is a technology. Technology without a problem that it's solving is just innovation theatre. But as a product person specifically, it can sometimes be hard to find your feet and how to have impact. But when we have to put ourselves in the shoes of business owners, we have to understand what problems they want to solve. Anytime you're solving a problem for someone, it's a good thing.
This week, we're joined by Ben Chisell, President and Chief Product Officer at Paysend. We'll talk with Ben about his journey, why he believes financial inclusion is so important, and how Paysend's secret recipe for settling international payment is helping to solve the single biggest problem in financial services.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Money Travels, presented by Visa, where we explore the extraordinary innovations in digital finance, transforming lives and livelihoods everywhere. I'm Rich.
I'm Max. Ben, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
Great to have you.
So, Ben, I want to dive straight in because I can't kind of let that sentence hang in the air for too long, the single biggest problem in financial services. But kind of when it comes to money movement, obviously the industry has come quite a long way. Like not too long ago, it used to be kind of cheaper to FedEx your hard currency overseas. But for a lot of the people, this is now kind of easily done on your smartphone, right? So, I could pick up my phone and send money to Max, who lives in France. I wouldn't do, and Max actually owes me money. But why don't we have a kind of quick chat about the problems that kind of still exist when it comes to moving money?
Yeah, I think it's kind of important to really understand that there's two parts to how money moves around the world. So there's the part that is, as you say, from you sending money to Max. This is the messaging. This is Max receiving an indication, notification in his app that you've sent him the money and he has access to it. And to be honest, I think there's been a huge amount of development there. The experience feels incredibly seamless, very easy, very fast. So I think from the consumer perspective, it's completely understandable to think that it's a solved problem. But actually, when you look underneath the surface and you see how that actually the money moves from, for example, your bank to Max's bank behind the scenes through all of these kind of very established closed system correspondent bank networks, that part of things is still extremely slow and expensive, and cumbersome for the institutions involved in that. And so, but payments, cross-border payments, to solve it, you really have to solve both things. And so what I personally see, and we see at Paysend, is that all of the innovation is being above the surface. It's what you see, but all of the things behind the scenes, just it's not really moved on. And so that's really the next biggest area to go and innovate in. It's a huge opportunity. The volume is exactly the same as the volume that you see from a messaging perspective, because every payment requires both sides. And so if we've got this problem that's solved, and then we have an equally sized problem that's just not really been looked at over the last few years, then that for us is just what we see as a huge opportunity. And that's really where we kind of are focusing at Paysend over the next few years.
So we're talking about the backbone, right? We're talking about the back office, right? That's what you're talking about. What would be fixing it, what would be the outcome, and who would that benefit at the end?
I think it's something that ultimately it benefits the ecosystem overall in lots of different ways. I will get to that, but the kind of first order effect essentially is when a business, whether it's a bank or a money remittance institution, wants to move money from one country to another, when they do it via the correspondent bank network, it's via Swift there's messaging, and via the correspondent bank network, it's something where, because it's a closed system, it's expensive. There's not enough competition. So those institutions, they have high costs. It also can take, let's say, 3 to 5 business days for the money to settle. And it's actually quite a cumbersome experience. But if I just focus on the first two things, because it's expensive, those businesses have to pass those costs on to their customers as well. And because there's money held kind of in transit through that period, it has an effect of the liquidity of the business operations as well. So when you're trying to grow a business and you have those two specific problems with a high cost base and it's a drain on your kind of corporate cash, this is something that really does constrain your growth. And so solving this problem essentially allows companies to have more cash available at any particular time through the year that they can go and invest in innovation instead of something that's tied up in cash in transit as it's moving through different countries. And it's something that allows them to lower their cost base, essentially then offering cheaper services to their customers. And so we feel that this problem in the ecosystem in the way it is today is just something that has these second order effects of stifling innovation for all of the customers of these businesses as well. So we feel by solving it, it really kind of enables kind of a next level of innovation in the industry as well.
So there's a huge amount of innovation. I guess when you're talking about the two stages, one is the UX, the customer experience side, and especially from an end user point of view. So us three, we probably have banking apps and other apps on our phones um, that just feel light years ahead of where they were, and that actually end user experience is so much better. But are you kind of digging into the fact that actually the next wave of innovation, the real impact is for SMBs, for businesses, when it comes to kind of cash flow and having cash tied up because of that settlement, even if it's 2, 3 days before the actual funds available in their account?
Yeah, essentially, I think what's really important for in this industry or as someone with a product background like myself is to make sure that you're really clear about what problems you're solving for customers and that those things are really meaningful for them. And I think in the industry, it's okay. So we see better user experience, no doubt about that. We also see a lot of technologies around, which we can maybe talk about stable coins later. But there's technology without a problem that it's solving is just innovation theater, right? And I think that one of the things again, as we're a cross-border payments business, we think about how to use technologies like stablecoins, like many others would. But I don't start with the technology. I start with the problem that our customers have. So when we talk to our customers, particularly those who operate in multiple jurisdictions, they tell us that it's just incredibly expensive to, for their treasury team to go to, key in a Swift payment that ultimately needs to take 5 business days to settle. It could be longer depending on public holidays and weekends, right? This is something where the actual amount of cash available to these businesses is just lower throughout the year because of the fact they're always moving money around. And it's still incredibly expensive. So the competition on the user experience side of things obviously results in a better cost for the end customer, but that innovation hasn't resulted in the same benefits for treasury teams, for example. So the thing that we kind of care most about is that whatever we do has to solve these specific customer problems that people talk to us about. And so we talk to people about the features that we have or the technologies that we may be innovating with, but honestly people don't care so much about those things. It's only when we go to them and say, we could save you $1 million a year in FX costs, and we can give you back an additional $10 million of available cash at any point in time. That's when people start paying attention. So I think on the user experience side, people feel that they want a smoother onboarding journey. They want an app that can allow them to do anything at any point in time. These are things that are somewhat obvious problems to solve because we're all individuals. But when we have to put ourselves in the shoes of business owners and treasury teams and chief financial officers of businesses, we have to understand what problems they want to solve, and it's a completely different set. And so I think one of the other shifts is making sure that we're able to take ourselves out of our comfort zone in terms of solving problems for ourselves and really make sure we understand the different things that keep awake all of these different personas at these businesses at night, and then solve those problems. So whatever the technology, whatever the point of view of what the biggest problem is, the thing that's important is there's a whole other set of really important user problems for all these different personas in these kind of different, in SMEs or in larger corporates. But the big opportunity here is put ourselves in their shoes, understand their problems, and then use technology to solve those.
What's been the change in the industry over the last kind of couple of years that people like yourself and Paysend have kind of come in and said, we need to kind of go back to addressing that customer problem, which is actually It's the back end movement of the money.
Yeah.
You're smirking there. Is this just a case of your product background has come through and said, well, it's when product people like myself kind of come in.
Personally, I've been in fintech for nearly 10 years, and it feels like it's changed quite a lot. It's matured quite a lot through that period. I think when I joined Paysend, which was nearly 4 years ago, 2021, it was a period when almost everyone was trying to do everything. So, there was almost no, um, there was less focus on really understanding what problems what customers had. It was more kind of looking at the market, looking what other people are doing, who, for those other companies that may be successful, having a little bit of fear of missing out, and then just doing that as well. And so I think what we had in that time was just a lot of companies were copying each other, and everyone's launching the same products and features. Everyone's raising money off the back of relatively similar things. But the problem is a lot of those products in a lot of these companies weren't getting traction. It's one thing to build it, it's another thing to grow it, it's another thing to make it profitable. And so I think we had a lot of innovation theatre 4 or 5 years ago. I think that between, let's say, 2022 and 2023, funding kind of dried up a little bit, and it meant people had to get back to basics. So what did that mean? It meant that we had to prune our product portfolio by just specifying a very, very clear mission statement that was the thing that guided all of our product decision making. So at Paysend, our mission is to simplify cross-border payments for everyone. But it wasn't always that way. But we had to kind of talk to our team. I personally had to go and talk to all of our team, understand what it was that they knew more than anyone else. What was the kind of secret source of Paysend that meant that we could be successful that some of our peers couldn't be? And what it really came down to is the thing that we feel like we know better than anyone else is cross-border payments. So that's our strength. So that's what we want to focus on. So the first step to answer your question is to kind of understand that. And don't try to be someone else. We have to be ourselves. And that means understanding what we care most about and what we're best at. So when we knew that, it became obvious. And to be honest, saying that mission statement at our company is like the least controversial thing you can imagine. But it wasn't that way because we were we were doing a lot of other things before that. So the first thing is to understand, what you care about, what your team want to put their life and soul into as a mission, and what their strengths are, and then saying no to everything else. So I think that, and then just being really, really good at focusing. So the first part to your question is you've got to know who you are and who you want to be. And then when you do that, then you have to go and talk to customers and understand what problems they have in your space. And that means, not just talking to people like yourself, but talking to basically anyone who has to send money to another country. And so when we do this is just user research and customer discovery, but casting our net relatively widely. And so when we do this, we just felt that there was a huge kind of consistent group of people in similar companies that just all experience a huge amount of pain. And when they read the news or read tech blogs or whatever, and they see that cross-border payments is a solved problem, well, it's not for them, right? Because they still feel exactly the same pain that they have for the last X number of years. So by establishing a clear mission, talking to customers, it just became obvious. And there's obviously a lot of those types of problems. We quantify those, and then we just decide which ones we're going to go and put our weight into. And this was just one of those that the customer problem is very clear. It's a kind of underloved customer segment, or has been for a long time, and the opportunity is massive. So it just became a very obvious thing for us to focus on. And as a product person, anytime you're solving a problem for someone, it's a good thing. Doesn't matter what whether it's something where it's a product that you use every day yourself, or it's a kind of problem that someone experiences in their corporate or working life.
It's simple when you lay it out as focus on one problem, do it really well, and talk to your customers. Right? I mean, it sounds that blueprint for for success sounds pretty simple.
It's really amazing how it's simple in words, and then just people don't put it into practice because they get distracted. And even that simple statement is easy to turn into 300-page book and endless, endless other blogs and podcasts talking about how complicated that is. But honestly, it's quite a simple formula, but it's about putting it into practice.
And it's really interesting. And I've worked in businesses where you've had like really kind of deep customer obsessed product leaders who've come in and kind of sat down first day on the job and said, we're focusing on far too much. We need to stop doing like these 30 things and focus on these like one or two things. Um, Obviously, you've been at Paysend 4 years. Previously, you were at Oak North and Starling Bank, but then you come from a e-commerce background and spent some time at eBay and Amazon. What were those initial months like when you kind of drew up your strategy of saying stop doing 30 things, and when you're speaking to kind of the chief exec and the team? And I'm asking this, it's not quite a loaded question because I've sat in some of those meetings before. I'm just interested, like, how did the business kind of react to that? And maybe that's why they hired you,
Mm.
because they needed some help kind of with their strategy.
Good question. Let me start with the mistake that I see other people have made. These could be managers or peers or friends, but I know a lot of product people, and I know a lot of mistakes people have made, including myself. Hopefully, just one time per problem. Um, but first is people join and they say, "I'm a product person. Listen to me because I'm a product person." And if you tell a founder or CEO or senior person that they should just listen to you because you're a product person and do what you say, it's not going to work. So that's not what I did, right? I've made that mistake before, so I won't make that mistake again. But I think the bit of advice I would always give to someone is don't just use the fact that you're quote unquote a product person as some kind of justification for not actually doing the work, right? So I have a playbook that I kind of use for tackling this problem. But I think that really for me comes back to my Amazon days, which is, for anyone, for either of you or for anyone listening, it's a writing culture, right? You have to write it down. And, I fully buy into the, 6-page peer FAQ process, the, Amazon's OP1 process of writing down your strategy and committing to your numerical goals, right? I fully commit to that way of working. So I think the thing that I did at Paysend that other people didn't do at Paysend and often don't do is say, my job is not to make any decisions. My job is to kind of extract the right decisions from the team. And the way I'm going to do that is by writing down a strategy in words, long form, talking 5,000-6,000 word strategy document. And then I'm going to get all the exec team, all the board together. We're going to read it all, and we're going to sit in a room for 2 days, and we're going to debate every single word in it. And then we're going to leave that period, those 2 days, committed to the same thing. So I think, the what's that process, right? Firstly, you have to be a little vulnerable as a product leader, because you have to say, I don't know all the answers. My job's not to come in and tell everybody what to do. My job is to find the right answer. So you're kind of the investigator rather than this kind of smart external person who just knows better. So you have to listen to everybody, and they have to understand that you are listening to them and you actually care about what they say. Then you have to take it on your own back to actually hold the pen on this document. It is my job, or was my job at that time, and still is, to be the author, the editor in chief, I suppose, of the strategy. And then you have to get everyone together, and then you have to facilitate a proper debate where you actually result in commitments to decisions, not just a commitment to have another meeting. And that requires very good facilitation skills between people who are very experienced, often more experienced than oneself, often more opinionated than oneself, and certainly with more experience in the company. So I think that kind of skill of being able to get those people to all point in the same direction and then commit to the same outcome is a challenge. So I think the thing that worked quite well in my first 6 months at Paysend was just going through that process. And I think everyone acknowledges that at the end of that period, we had a strategy. We had one strategy. Everyone knew where it was. Everyone had it, and everyone knew it was signed off by the exec team and the board. So that, because we had that, then we could go and just make the decisions very quickly that were outlined in that. So we put a lot of focus up front, and then what that meant was we had very easy implementation and commitment to those decisions. You can imagine if that didn't happen, you just make a bunch of decisions and then people start questioning, why did we make that decision? Was that the right decision? Who made that decision? Should we change our decision? And then you kind of just go back into this kind of chaotic world. So I think that end of 2021 period when we had that became quite transformational for the remainder of the my time there.
Did you effectively rewrite that mission statement over those first 6 months? And I'm just interested, like, you obviously had the buy-in from your peers and from the founder. It'd be interesting to kind of go back and say that, because Paysend started, as you said, as like initially a focus on remittance. Was there a clear mission statement before to say, we simplify cross-border payments for everyone, or was that something that kind of came out of that kind of 6-month workshop, which then the whole company kind of coalesced around?
I think it was on reflection. It was a kind of two-part phase. I think that the outcome of that first thing wasn't necessarily that we ended up with the right strategy. It was just that we had one, right? And so a lot of companies say they have a
Yeah.
strategy, but what they actually mean is they have multiple strategies, and they're not exactly sure which is the right one or which piece of which one should be paid attention to. So I think just getting us to the point where there was one then meant that we could go and really start tackling like what's the right strategy to go and execute on these things. So there was another phase about 6 months after that where we ended up refining our mission statement. We said no to one or two extra of those things, and that was really the point at which we became simplifying cross-border payments for everyone.
I'm digging into this because I think this part's fascinating. I'm just interested, like we've talked about the impact, a big impact on the people that were working there, because they suddenly see a company that is aligned around a kind of single source of truth. Were there times were there conversations with customers around, well, actually, we're not going to do some of the stuff that maybe we've been talking to you about for the last kind of 6 months, year. We're the experts in cross border, so that's going to be our focus. And how did those kind of conversations go?
I think in a way we were quite lucky that a lot of these other products were not that far along the line. So, that's a big problem if you have corporate customers where these products are established part of their workflows. Um, but actually, it was kind of either maybe they just launched, maybe they were halfway through development. So it was more like it was at that stage. So actually, it was quite in terms of your specific question, we didn't actually have to have that many uncomfortable decisions outside of our immediate team. I think the tougher conversations were things like, for example, maybe a product lead joins a lead a product that was no longer part of our strategy. That's someone who joined the business, they were super passionate about a different problem than solving cross-border payments. And they brought other people in who also were passionate about solving these other problems. And then we say we're not going to do that anymore. So I think those are more the uncomfortable conversations to have. But to be honest, as a leader, you have to have them. So it's
Yeah.
it's just it's just part of the job. But as long as you have this, overarching kind of strategy that everyone is committed to, it at least makes all of the kind of logic for all of these decisions very straightforward.
Have you seen other kind of companies in the space
I,
follow suit, or do you think actually I don't really care about them? It's what we're focused on is this problem.
I do generally, if you kind of look at the market as a whole 5 years ago versus the market now, I definitely would agree that there's on average more focus on a narrower set of specific customer problems for certain companies. Um, I think that there's two things that come to mind. One is when you do that, it doesn't mean that actually the execution is easy, right? It's one where you've kind of taken the strategic risk out of the equation, and now it's just about your ability to execute. And so I find that even though there's better focus, it doesn't mean it just means that the kind of differentiator with businesses is their ability to execute. And so I think as a company and a culture, like we're kind of at Paysend, we're builders, right? We like inventing things, we like solving problems. And so that's what we spend all of our time doing. And I think we just got really, really good focus on solving those problems. So I think you are right that there is better focus on the whole, but it doesn't mean everyone's going to be successful by default, right? So I think that's kind of one part. I think the bit where I do see people getting distracted is when they spend more time thinking about the technology and than the customer problem. So I think previously the distraction was customer problems and business lines. Now the distraction is technologies. And I think that the successful companies that are going to navigate this kind of AI stablecoin Web3 kind of simultaneous waves are the ones who, don't get distracted. They're the ones who understand what problems they need to solve and which technology is the right way to solve it. Whether it's an if statement or a large language model, you still need to, really understand the problem and the customer and pick. So I'm interested to see how this particular wave goes. I know what our approach is. I know enough other companies where I think their approach is a very thoughtful one as well. I also know that other companies that just throw millions of dollars at third-party AI machine learning solutions and hope that it's going to revolutionize their business. So I'm interested to see how this one plays out.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think that if you go to, the various events and shows over the last kind of few years, there's always kind of a theme. It might be a well, it's now stablecoin, but it was a kind of blockchain crypto theme a few years ago. Then it's an AI theme, and you're right. Some people are saying we have to have a strategy, so let's go and hire some people or throw some money at a
Mm,
problem, just so we have a piece of a document, 40-page document that
mm.
says we've got a strategy, rather than saying let's understand what the problem is and can that technology be used to solve it.
I think interestingly, an explicit decision to do nothing is still a strategy, right? A strategy doesn't mean you have to do anything. I mean, one
Correct.
of the things I notice, for example, I mean, a lot of people try to sell me AI based software from people who claim to be AI experts with AI customer success experts, right? They're all these things are incredibly expensive. And as a business leader, what do we want? Ultimately, one of the things with AI is automation. Why do you want automation? Because it reduces your cost base. If the business model hasn't settled down and all you're doing is translating a headcount cost into a third party vendor cost, that's not a good trade, right? And so I think there's a lot of things that need to settle down in the industry. So actually, I don't even disagree that, a strategy of just wait and see and experiment is I mean, that's just as good a strategy as anything else at the moment. I don't think anyone's qualified to say what the right strategy is for what company at the moment.
What are the big challenges that still persist, like, back to that customer angle and their needs, irrespective of the technology that might or might not be required to actually, deliver on those needs? What are those inefficiencies and challenges that you see in the market, um, that you're actively working on?
So I think for the end consumer perspective, the it still comes down to three things that we say at Payson. It comes down to how fast the recipient gets the money, how easy it is to send the money, and how much it costs to send the money. Right? Three very, very simple problem statements that are incredibly complicated to solve. And it's because of the diversity around the world. Essentially, let's say 200 countries sending money to 200 other countries. There's a lot of combinations there, and there's lots of different ways to fund a cross-border payment, and there's a lot of different ways that the recipient would want to receive the cross-border payment. So there's essentially millions of different combinations of what a cross-border payment is, and I think the that kind of simplicity of the problem statement and the complexity of the world, like that interplay is just a really, really interesting place to be. It's like actually just a problem that I love, getting up every day and going to work to solve with the team, and our team does as well. So I think it's kind of one where it's just about iteration, in my opinion. So it's something where we want to give customers really, slick kind of sending experience. What does that mean? It means we constantly need to be finding ways to remove friction from their experience. It means that we need to be completely obsessed over our data, making sure we understand every friction point, every time a customer calls us up or leaves a bad review, and understanding really what happened, really understanding the genuine root causes here, and then solving those things. So I think with that kind of friction, I'm not someone who really believes in silver bullet solutions here. It's something where being completely data driven, really passionate about solving the problem, and really relentless and tenacious in just keeping going and making it better and better is the right strategy for us. And I think just by focusing on those kind of basics of removing friction, it gets us to a point where we're growing 50, 60% year on year. So I think that as a strategy has worked really well for us, and we'll keep doing that. I think on the receiving side, the thing that we really see is customers want choice. So if you're sending money to someone, you don't necessarily know what their preference is for how to use the money. So if I just put if someone was sending me to money in the UK, receiving it to my bank account is pretty standard. But in other markets, that's just not true. People may prefer to get it sent to a digital wallet. Maybe they'd want it sent to a crypto wallet. Maybe they'd want it sent to cash. Maybe they'd want it to sent to a card. Maybe they'd want there's to send it to a phone number. There's lots of different ways that people would want to receive money. So I think on the recipient side, the thing we focus on is choice. Last year, I did a bit of a Latin America trip. So like for example, we have a customer service team in Guatemala. So I went to see them, one of our network team there as well, and she took me around to one of the local markets, and I was trying to buy some gifts for my children. Just wanted some local things from a market. So I needed access to the money. So she took me to a cash machine. There's maybe 5 or 6 people in the queue, um, and I tried to take money out, and the cash machine didn't have any cash left in it. So here's me in a market in Guatemala wanting to take cash out. I can't get the cash. As someone from the UK, there's usually another cash machine from another bank, a minute away. The nearest cash machine was 20-minute walk away. So, I kind of went back to the shop and said, hey, is there another way that I can pay? And they said, well, you can use your card, but there's a 5% extra charge for paying with a card here because of the extra costs that we have from the point of sale terminal. And so you end up in this situation where, you don't quite know the best way to send the money. But that said, I spoke to a number of other customers in Guatemala as well who've used Paysend. And, the other types of problems, maybe they go to the other cash machine and there's no power, or that other cash machine is out of cash and they say just come back tomorrow. And so I'm kind of personally from a world where cash machine is just available. I mean, I can't remember thankfully, I can't remember the last time that there was no cash in a cash machine in the UK when I wanted to go get access to my money. And actually there it's a completely different situation. So I think that, and actually as a market, Guatemala is very interesting because there's a lot of digital development. So, they're launching QR code schemes for those merchants to be able to receive through QR codes in the store. There's actually good development in terms of the technology of cash machines themselves. Like we have a really good partner called 5B in Guatemala who's partnering with us there as well. So actually what you find is these kind of, what may have been considered underdeveloped markets from a customer experience perspective, they know that and they're trying to innovate and trying to leapfrog. So I think what we'll actually have, maybe in 2 years in a market like Guatemala, actually is just something where there's even the best choice of being able to receive money. So yeah, knowing what's happening in that market, I think it's really exciting. And I think that then we'll have digital wallets, QR codes, account payouts, card payouts, cash payments, and stablecoin wallets, whatever we want there as well in a couple of years. So we have a product that we launched and we're scaling at the moment called Paysend Libre. And that essentially means that rather than send money to the details, you just send the money to the person and you let them choose how they want to receive the money. So that's one of the innovations that we've launched and scaling at the moment, and we're going to be launching that more broadly across Latin America in the next couple of months. So I think on the receiving side, it's still part of friction, but you're kind of by giving the receiver choice, you also remove friction from the sending experience because you can just say send money to Max or send money to Rich. You don't need to go and say, Max, can you give me your 18-digit Clave account number in Mexico? You just say, here, look, here's the money, and you could go key in the details and you can go and receive it however you want. So I think that choice on the recipient side is incredibly important for us. If we look at the speed, that's about our partner network. So we have to make sure that we have the best partners or the best connections in all of these countries. So what does that look like? It means we have, kind of 80 or so partners around the world. Some of those are directly connected to the payment schemes. Some of them are aggregators. Some, for example, like Visa, who are have their own networks that we can kind of connect into as well. But we don't necessarily have particular preferences for one or the other. We just want to have a network with a broad selection, and we have a smart orchestration kind of system that allows us to go in real time say which is the right partner for which particular user. So that kind of network that just is the as high quality as it can be to give customers the best experience depending on where they're sending money. Sometimes partners have downtime, sometimes they have issues. Sometimes, certain payouts may be better from an experience perspective with one provider or another. For example, one may be better at sending instantly crediting an account for payouts under $1,000, and some may be faster for payouts over $1,000. So we have a system that automatically routes those things to provide the best experience. And then the last thing is on the cost side. So making sure we're constantly negotiating with our partners to ultimately minimize the cost so we can pass those things on to our end users as well. So I think on the customer experience side, it's like this breadth and diversity. There's just a really, really interesting set of problems. Um, it's really great to speak to our customers, understand the pain that they feel with this, how it impacts their daily lives, and then how our focus on data iteration and on the breadth of our network just ultimately makes life better for them.
So I want to come back to one of the first things and how Max kind of introduced the episode in terms of the single biggest problem, or maybe biggest opportunity in financial services. We've talked a lot about um, that user experience and how with what Paysend Libre, it's offering the choice to the receiver. But you started to talk about settlement being that kind of number two problem. And it might be interesting to understand, A, what are the problems you see? Just dig into that a little bit deeper. And then how are you
Mm.
guys solving that? Um, and really kind of understand it. And I love speaking to really good product people who start with that customer problem first and understanding what the impact of the work you're doing on settlement, because settlement, I'm not saying payments are super interesting, but settlement is, I guess the really boring part about, moving money, because it's the back end stuff that nobody really sees, yet it's certainly in the way you're talking about it, just the biggest opportunity that you see at the moment.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I think with settlement is it almost becomes a lot more interesting when you look at the number of how much money is moving around the world through the correspondent bank networks from a settlement perspective. So it's one of these things when you say it's $150 trillion, then it starts to become an interesting problem that people pay attention to. So whatever the number people may cite, it's a very, very big number, right? So I think that people's attention and therefore it starts to get focused on how we can do something. But to your point of why that problem, we spoke before about focusing on the customer, but also sometimes you kind of come across these ideas because of pain we're experiencing as a business as well. So we think, how do we solve our own problems? So, so what is Paysend, right? So we started off as a remittance product, and now we're trying to simplify cross-border payments for everyone, and we have the world's biggest digital payment network powering that. So what does that mean? We have to move money across the world very regularly in large sums. And this is something where it does tie up a lot of our corporate cash, particularly for the bigger corridors. So for example, like payouts to Mexico. So this is something where if we're experiencing a problem ourselves where we need to move corporate funds to Mexico, and it's something where that gets tied up in transit, and we would have to, get charged relatively high costs in terms of moving it, then that's just a problem that we want to solve for ourselves. So that's where we started with this. So what have we done? So we have essentially our network is two parts. There's the kind of customer messaging layer that we spoke about before, and then we have our settlement engine, and together we kind of call those things our open payment network. So what have we done? The first thing that we did essentially was find a way for us to go and use all these different technologies to allow us to move our corporate funds to Mexico instantly. So, we've gone essentially in terms of managing our business here to something where those funds could be tied up for 3 to 5 days, to something where they arrive in terms of being settled funds and able to use in 15 seconds. So, firstly, we just solved it for ourselves. So, for one of our biggest, most important kind of corridors and payout countries, we just made settlement instant. So that's the first thing. And by doing that, we have a playbook, and we're rolling these things out country by country. But the other important thing to say here is it's not just one technology, because we're not trying to initiate a stablecoin strategy or an AI strategy or any other technology strategy. We're just trying to understand what problem we have as a business, and then what technologies or technology should we use to solve that. And so our settlement engine incorporates all these different technologies, and it's not going to be the same solution in all countries either.
You repeated that like many times over talking about the importance of what the clients want, the customer wants, in your terms. And we can feel like you deeply care about it. Where's this fire coming from, and this passion coming from?
Yeah, I'll tell you. I think there's actually two parts to this. There's the personal side, and there's the work experience side as well. I think on the personal side, the thing that I wanted to do was just solve a problem that was, or set of problems that just were fundamental in people's everyday life. And I think that money is just, it's one of those kind of like core pillars of people's lives. Like, and trying to tackle that specific problem is always just something that's been of interest to me. I've always feel like from a young age, my parents helped me manage our limited, or my limited kind of budget well, and understand the importance of money. And I just kind of had this ethos through my life of my own personal attitude to money. And I just felt it's a thing that's so fundamental. I have this, approach that's worked for me, and is there a way to kind of combine those two things into a product? But also working for US based companies, I wanted to work in an industry where, London essentially, or the UK, had a center of gravity that wasn't just going to get pulled over to the US in a few years. So, I got a lot of experience there, but I wanted to help build UK centered technology businesses that got global scale. So that was kind of the reason for joining Starling, because I think the company had the potential to do that, and they're still doing a great job. It's the same with Oak North, and it's the same with Paysend. These London-centered UK financial services technology businesses. And I think it's an industry that's, it's not going anywhere. I think that the talent in London is amazing, or in the UK is amazing, and just there's a whole kind of set of ingredients there that's just going to make it keep going from strength to strength. I think in terms of the customer side of things, this is the work experience side. There's a very specific lesson for me from my eBay days. So when I joined eBay, worked with, let's say, 40 or so incredibly smart technical data scientists. Many of those people are going to be working in AI-based roles at some very significant West Coast US-based businesses today. and they had, they come from, very obviously well-known companies doing search in terms of Google, Bing, Yahoo. So, had this privilege of working with some of the most like amazing technical data scientists that, I mean, I was so lucky genuinely to just get dumped into the team with all of these great people. Um, so I couldn't teach them anything about, how to go and optimize a decision tree forest. I couldn't teach them anything about how to, build a linear regression based, title relevance classifier, right? There's things that I could not help them with. But the thing that it kind of was common across all of them is they weren't focused enough on the customer problem. So they were all focused on how do we optimize our simulation? How do we pick our, optimization kind of target? And how do we optimize, how do we kind of keep simulating and experimenting in the spirit of making that number better? But what they weren't doing enough of was just looking at the customer experience that these things produced. And so we could end up in situations where the the simulation said this new variation of the algorithm is incredibly positive and it's going to increase conversion rate for customers by it's kind of single digit percent, and then you actually look at the experience and it just looks incredibly confusing. Sellers found it confusing and unpredictable. They didn't know how to sell anymore, and that had a load of second and third order effects of how search actually became worse. And so the value that I was able to bring to that team was building relationships with sellers who really understood how to sell their products, really understanding the end customer buying experience from a qualitative and quantitative perspective, turning that into customer insight, and then working with the very technical data science team to kind of make sure that we'd not only solve this kind of numerical theoretical problem, but it really translated into better search relevance as well. And so the thing where it was like when I realized that as a product person, my job's not to just come in and tell everybody what to do. It's to try and understand what strengths people have, what we're doing well, what we're not doing well, and just kind of putting all of that together and bringing in what I can, what I can add, which is the customer insights and the ability to get people aligned and get people committed to the same thing. So I do have the personal kind of desire to solve the problem, but also just in my career as a product person, just in working with so many different types of people in different countries with different expertise, you just realize that the value you can add is to unify all of those people behind the common strategy, not just kind of, come in and tell them what to do because I'm quote unquote a product person. I think the thing that I feel almost more strongly about than anything else as a product person is how to actually have impact. And I think the story before when we were talking about how to kind of take Paysend's kind of product portfolio and prune it down into something that was a really focused strategy. Like it's just such a cool time to be a product manager. The industry is enormous, the biggest total addressable market we can imagine. New technologies on the horizon. There's a lot of great companies that really, as I say, have an intersection between a good business model and solving a really interesting problem. It's just a great time to be part of this industry. But as a product person specifically, it can sometimes be hard to find your feet and how to have impact in a world of payments experts, engineers, compliance experts, finance experts, and things. And so I think kind of being able to, as a product manager, find the right way to have impact. Like understand what your superpower is as a product manager. Find the right type of role in the right type of company. I think that's an area that I just think it's incredibly important to get right. It's not just something where because it's an exciting time, people can just join it and have a great time and have a load of impact. I think specifically as a product manager, you need to find your specific way that you can have impact.
We started the episode, Max kind of used that phrase around solving the single biggest problem in financial services. It sounds like the approach has been actually that single biggest problem has been, for a while, I think people forgot that they were actually addressing customer problems and we should start with the customer problem. I think over the last kind of few years, as you said, kind of technology came onto the scene and people focused on the technology, or people built stuff and then found people to sell it to. Um, you guys have obviously focused on a particular customer problem, which is what you're driving now. Firstly, is that, do you think, a fair answer to that kind of single biggest problem has been, maybe we've just diverted from actually addressing real customer problems? And secondly, kind of what's next for the industry and kind of for Paysend?
I do think it's a fair characterization, to be honest. I think, and not that everyone was guilty of that, but a lot of this industry and a lot of other industries forgot about solving customer problems. It became about innovating, fear of missing out, looking around at what's happening, and just trying to do as much of those things as possible to generate as much press as possible. Right. So I do agree with what you're saying. I do think, as we spoke about before, we are in a better shape at the moment. I think in terms of what's next, I mean, one of the things that does keep me awake at night a little is, other than my kids, is uh, the balance between optimization. So when I mentioned before on our consumer side, we're trying to continually optimize around, the speed and the friction and the costs. So it's like balancing that versus the disruptive technologies in the market. So I think next for Paysend is making sure that we strike the right balance between those two things. But what do I think in terms of the actual opportunities? I do think that there's a lot of interest and there's a lot of potential with stablecoin, but I think it's something where we need to be a lot more thoughtful about how to use the technology. So, like for example, it's a great way to send, US dollar denominated stablecoin from wallet to wallet, but you still have to, there's still an off ramp that can still be very, very expensive. So people saying that stablecoin is going to solve cross-border payments, well, not when it's going to cost you 3 to 6% in FX costs for the on and off ramp together, right? When we're talking about the overall cost could be, kind of, 10 basis points, for example, if you get it right for a kind of major corridor. So I think that is a really interesting technology, but I don't think it's something where we could just say this technology by itself just solves the customer problems by default. So I think the next few years is going to be about using these technologies in the right way to solve the right customer problems.
Stablecoin is an interesting one because, if you went to like a Money 2020 show 3 or 4 years ago, it was about the emergence of blockchain or crypto, and that people are asking, there's got to be a place for this in moving money, but I don't think anybody knew what that was. It strikes me that certainly the first iteration of that technology was
Mm,
technology for technology's sake rather than addressing a customer problem. It was a solution looking for a problem, but now it seems like, well, actually, with a bit more advancement in kind of digital assets and the way money moves digitally,
mm.
we can see proper applications for this that solve real world problems here, and here.
Yeah. I mean, I was at Money 2020 a couple of weeks ago in Amsterdam, and I think you know, it's still the same. It's still a lot of technologies and a lot of
Right.
interesting things that haven't quite found their use cases and their product market fit yet. But it's okay. People need to experiment and put things out there to, go through the discovery process. Um, but in terms of stablecoin, I really do think there's a lot of utility in them. But as I say, it requires a lot more thought than launch stablecoin equals innovation, right? It's still fundamentally about identifying the kind of
Yeah.
problems in the intersection of people care about them and a business can generate profit from solving that problem. And I think that people are still, you can speak to as many people about stablecoin, listen to as many presentations of Money 2020 about it, but I still feel like people are not quite sure about what the right set of projects are for their business that's in the intersection of both of those things. So, I still think that the journey the next few years is going to be about just being a lot more thoughtful about these things. Um, I think that the other problem that I think is very related, but not doesn't exactly map to it, is about the identification of the recipient, and how do you make sure that when you're sending money cross border that you really know who you're sending money to, right? This is the kind of, maybe it's solved with blockchain, maybe this is, but ultimately it's about having some kind of identifier that kind of identifies the recipient, so you know that you can place trust in who's going to be receiving the money. And I think that that kind of AML and KYC layer is something that's inherently, tied to Web3, but it's not exactly the same thing. So I think that, the kind of stablecoin technology plus the way to, give customers control of their data and really be able to place reliance on the details that you're sending to. I think those are things that are like fundamental in kind of building blocks of the next generation of payment products. So I think they're definitely the things to pay attention to.
Is that what keeps you? I mean, there's lots of probably, as you said, your kids keep you up at night, but what keeps you in this industry is there are still so many really interesting problems that can be
Mm.
solved and so much potential in the technology that's out there that must kind of drive you, the team at Paysend, for way into the future, right?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I really enjoy about payments and specifically cross-border payments is I genuinely feel like it's a product and industry that can be a technology business. I think when you look at other parts of other parts of financial services, like obviously worked at Starling for a little while, like ultimately a bank is going to be a bank. And whereas I think with payments, sending money is a technology just inherently. And I think that there's just a kind of more opportunity to invent the future with it rather than have to go and do something as per a very prescriptive rule book. Still the right rules, but it's something that's prescriptive. So I think that there's a lot of kind of more opportunity to go and really define the customer problem and work backwards to go and pick the right technologies to solve that. So I think that that freedom is something that I find very, very fulfilling and interesting as a product person. But also Paysend as a company for me, like having something that it's a proven industry with a proven business model. It's something that's growing very quickly. The business is cash generating. Like it's a very safe company to be at the same time as being able to invest our time in innovation. And so I think you get a lot of companies that are good businesses but don't innovate. You have other companies that innovate but they're not supported by good business underneath. And so I think that in this industry, and Payson in particular, we're a company that has both the best of both of those things. So that's one of the reasons why I really love the company that I'm at. And one of the reasons our team does as well. One of the things that I really like in my current role is I kind of work with everybody. So, in any single day, I'll be talking with, our compliance team, our legal team, our analytics team, finance team, some backend engineers, UX engineers, designers, PR people, writers, you name it. I'll work with everybody. One of the things that I personally don't see enough of is celebrating the people who actually do all the hard work. These are the people in our company and most companies that are actually doing the hard work and building these products for customers.
Absolutely. And you're so true. The people behind the camera, the people on stage, are usually the voice of those teams, but we tend to forget to recognize the hard work behind the scene to actually put those people on stage.
Yeah, and people have different strengths, and I think that as the sign of a good culture is when people appreciate each other's strengths and differences instead of point fingers at each other's deficiencies. I think one of the things I really enjoy about Paysend's culture now, maybe even compared to when I joined, is that it's really something where people appreciate what other people are good at. I think as a leader, it's really important that you have a culture where people do appreciate that, and then you get the best out of each other.
Ben, thank you so much for joining us. We've really enjoyed talking to you today.
Thanks very much for the invitation. It's really great to speak to you.
That is for Rich and I this week. To keep the conversation going, you can follow us on our social media. And of course, don't forget to follow the show wherever you follow your podcasts.
If you enjoyed what you heard today, leave us a review, tell your friends, or better still, do both. We'll be back next time to explore more life-changing innovations in digital finance. So wherever your travels take you, remember to join us for the next installment of Money Travels presented by Visa.